This is an iHeart podcast.
Welcome in, everyone, to Lively Lewis Stories.
That's right. We're back with even more awesome adventures with Levi and Ivy.
Set your storytime meter to fun and get ready to join the Lively Lewis crew.
All you need is your imagination and...
Off we go!
I can't wait to see where our story takes us today.
Have you ever wanted to get more Lively Lewis in your life?
Well, we've got you covered.
Grab an adult and zoom over to livelylewisshop.com.
Or just click on the link in our show notes.
Enough about that. Let's get to today's super Lively Lewis story.
3, 2, 1, Blastoff! Shouted Levi as he laid in the grass in his backyard. He stared up at a crystal blue sky as clouds drifted by overhead. Next to him, Ivy watched as well. Captain Levi, check. Captain Levi, this is Captain Ivy. We are now leaving the atmosphere, said Ivy as she pretended to push buttons and flip switches on an imaginary control panel in front of her. Excellent, Captain Ivy, called Levi back as he flipped imaginary levers and switches. Another successful launch. We'll be back exploring outer space in no time. The two brave explorers then let their minds create a galactic wonderland all around them. What they once knew as their backyard was now transformed in their minds to the outer reaches of the galaxy. Levi and Ivy were now flying through a star-filled sky, dodging meteors and setting their sights on their next space adventure. That was until... Levi, Ivy, it's time for dinner, called their mom, interrupting their daydream and shaking them right back into the reality of their own backyard. Mom, we were just about to land on a brand new planet, said Ivy as she stood up. Yeah, I was thinking we were going to name it Levi-topia. That has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Asked Levi as he stood up next to Ivy. Not as nice as Ivy-topia, said Ivy with a giggle. I bet on your planet it would rain cheeseburgers and every day would be Saturday. Sounds good to me, answered Levi. And I bet your planet would be covered in marshmallow trees and chocolate milk rivers, right? Exactly, said Ivy as she walked toward the house with a big smile. Well, you can tell us all about your space adventure over dinner, said their mom. Now let's head inside and get washed up. Once Levi and Ivy sat down at the table, they noticed that their dad had a big smile on his face. They got really excited, wondering what was the big surprise he had to tell them. So we're going on a trip tomorrow, said Levi and Ivy's dad. Tomorrow we're going to the Science Museum to see the brand new space exploration exhibit, exclaimed Levi and Ivy at the same time. Well, sort of, answered their dad. I got you two a special meet and greet with Professor Quazar. He's the lead scientist on the new Space Shuttle 3000 project. Levi and Ivy couldn't believe what they were hearing. They knew all about Professor Quazar and were over the moon that they were going to get to meet him in person. It was even better than seeing the new museum exhibit. I have so many questions for Professor Quazar, said Levi. Like, what kind of turbo boosters are they using on the new space shuttle? And when is the test flight? And how far can it go? And how fast can it go? And has he ever discovered a new planet in one of his missions? And has he ever wished on a shooting star while in outer space? Added Ivy, interrupting Levi. And what does it feel like to be weightless? And what are they going to name the space shuttle? And can we take a ride on it too? Ivy and Levi had a giant list of questions that they would be asking the professor when they met him the next day. And as dinner went on, it grew and grew. Now, kiddos, I know Professor Quazar is very excited to meet you, but maybe we wait on the 101 questions until after we say hello, joked their dad as he ate his dinner. You think we're going to ask him 101 questions? Asked Ivy, looking shocked at the number. Because clearly we're going to ask him like 1,001 questions, laughed Levi. After all, outer space is massive and filled with so many unanswered questions. How long are we going to meet him anyways? Levi and Ivy's dad went on to tell him that they would be with Professor Quazar for the whole day, assisting him in his lab and learning all about the Space Shuttle 3000 project. After dinner, Levi and Ivy got ready for bed and made a wish on a shooting star. Both wished that their time with Professor Quazar would be a day they would never forget. The next morning could not arrive fast enough, and when Levi and Ivy's parents woke up, they found their two excited space explorers had already eaten breakfast, gotten dressed, and were waiting to head over to the Science Museum. In no time at all, Levi and Ivy found themselves running up the giant stone stairs that led to the museum. And waiting for them when they arrived was, of course, Professor Quazar! Shouted Levi and Ivy together. We are such big fans of you. Ivy continued. And we can't wait to spend the day with you learning everything we can about space and the Space Shuttle 3000 project. And maybe, just maybe, we could get a ride on the shuttle. Levi and Ivy both laughed, as did Professor Quazar. Well, you never know exactly what will happen here at the Space Museum, answered the professor. But I do know we have a great time no matter what we do. Levi and Ivy said goodbye to their parents and followed Professor Quazar down a long hallway, passing a sign that said, "Employees only." Professor Quazar didn't waste any time once they all got into his lab. Levi and Ivy, I am so happy to have you join me today. I know how much you love space travel, and we need to move quickly if we're going to fit everything in that I'd like to show you today, began Professor Quazar. Well, we have all day, answered Levi. So why the big rush? While all day does seem like a good amount of time to spend here at the museum, it's just the right amount of time to fly back and forth to outer space, said Professor Quazar in a calm voice as he looked at the clipboard filled with notes and numbers. I guess you're right, answered Ivy as what Professor Quazar had said slowly sank in, and once it did, she and Levi didn't know how to react. Wait a minute. Did you just say we're flying to outer space today? Asked Levi, sounding shocked and unbelievably excited. An outer space trip on Space Shuttle 3000? Shouted Ivy, just as excited as Levi. Not exactly, said the professor, making Levi and Ivy very confused. We don't call it Space Shuttle 3000 anymore. It's now called Space Shuttle Stardust. And as he said that, he opened two large doors that led into a giant garage. Inside the massive garage was the biggest space shuttle Levi and Ivy had ever seen in person. More specifically, it was the only space shuttle Levi and Ivy had ever seen in person. We can't waste any more time. We need to hop aboard right now, said Professor Quazar. It's perfectly safe, and no one knows more about this shuttle than I do. And if everything goes according to plan, I've mapped out, we'll be back just in time for your parents to pick you up. You see, I have taken this trip today because I need to check on the Space Station Nebula. The cameras that we installed to monitor the surrounding galaxy here at the museum are not transmitting any signal. I'm sure it's nothing I can't fix quickly. Levi and Ivy just stood there and listened to Professor Quazar talk as he gave them spacesuits and instructed them how to put them on. He continued telling the excited young space explorers about their mission as he walked them onto the Space Shuttle Stardust and closed the giant exterior door behind them. So yeah, that's it. Pretty straightforward and simple, said Professor Quazar to Levi and Ivy, who thought this twist to their museum visit sounded amazing. But definitely not simple. Are you sure everything will be okay? Asked Ivy. Absolutely, answered Professor Quazar. The first trip on a new shuttle is always my favorite. First trip? Said Levi as his eyes got wide. So we'll be going into space on your new shuttle's first ever launch? Could this take it any better? It could. The possibilities in space are endless, so you never know what amazing things you'll see or do, said Professor Quazar reassuringly. And with not another minute to spare, Professor Quazar told Levi and Ivy to buckle up and begin the countdown. Then, as they had done so many times in their backyard, they counted down from 10, anticipating a wonderful space adventure. Except this time, they wouldn't be having that space adventure in their imagination, in their backyard. All the planets, stars, and galaxies they would be flying past would be real. And they couldn't wait to see it all. Space Shuttle Stardust rumbled as the turbo thrusters turned on. Then, as Levi and Ivy counted, 3, 2, 1! They blasted straight through the open ceiling in the giant garage, and in no time, Levi, Ivy, and Professor Quazar were zooming through the atmosphere, heading toward an adventure unlike any other. Minutes passed as Levi and Ivy stared out the space shuttle's circular windows. They watched as a million stars surrounded them, shining brightly against the darkness of space. Then all of a sudden, the shuttle settled down and began to drift along calmly and slowly. Great job, you two. You are officially on your first space shuttle ride. How does it feel? Asked Professor Quazar. Levi and Ivy couldn't answer. No words could convey how exciting and breathtaking it was. But the smile on their faces told Professor Quazar all he needed to know. He told them to enjoy the view as he navigated to Space Station Nebula. As they sat and watched the wonders of space unfold before them, Levi and Ivy suddenly realized they both had a question to ask Professor Quazar. Hey, Professor, while we're drifting along, do you think it would be okay if we unbuckled our seatbelts and had a chance to float around in zero gravity? Asked Levi. I don't see why not, said Professor Quazar. It's one of the most fun things about being up here. Have fun, but just watch out so that you don't bump into anything. Levi and Ivy barely let him finish his sentence before they unbuckled their seatbelts and let zero gravity take over. They floated around, gently sailing from one end of the shuttle to the other, laughing and giggling the whole time. They did space flips midair and bounced gently off the walls, being careful to avoid any knobs, buttons, or switches. As they were floating around, Levi made his way over to one of the windows. "Ivy, can you believe this is what we're doing right now?" said Levi. Ivy didn't respond because she was too busy seeing what it felt like to dance in zero gravity. In case you're wondering, it's awesome. Levi continued to stare out the window and let his imagination take over. As he thought of all the amazing things they could see that day, something caught his eye. He turned his head quickly, but didn't see anything. Going back to his daydream, Levi saw something move again just out of view. He called Ivy over to his window to have a look. He thought maybe it was just his mind playing tricks on him. But when Ivy came over and looked out the window, he noticed something was moving as well. And that's when they saw it. Plain as day, a real life. Hey friends, what do you think it's going to be? Shout it out. "Alien!" screamed Levi and Ivy as they pushed themselves back from the window and went floating into the control panel by Professor Quazar. "Kids, please watch out. We don't want to press any buttons we're not supposed to," said Professor Quazar, turning around just in time to see the scared looks on their faces. "What's wrong?" Ivy and Levi couldn't speak and instead just pointed out the window. Professor Quazar floated over to see what was going on for himself. As he looked out the window, he laughed and turned back around with a big smile on his face. "I see you've met Zara," said Professor. "She's a space friend of mine from planet Glimmeron. She always likes to say hello to any passing shuttles. I'll let her in. You can say hello to her yourselves." Levi and Ivy immediately felt better because Professor Quazar knew the little alien and now were very excited to meet her. After the professor allowed Zara to enter the space shuttle, Levi and Ivy quickly found themselves standing in front of the cutest purple and blue alien they had ever seen in person. More specifically, it was the only purple and blue alien Levi and Ivy had ever seen in person. "Hello, Zara. It's great to see you again," said Professor Quazar before introducing his friends to Levi and Ivy. "Wow, you're a real alien," said Levi. "And you're a real person," said Zara with a look of amazement on her face. "No matter how many times I meet a person, I just can't believe they really exist. So what brings you to my part of the galaxy, Professor?" "We're up here to make a quick run by Space Station Nebula. The video connection has been down for a few days, so we just came up here to fix it," replied Professor Quazar. "So, just a quick trip." "Oh no, if I were you, I'd stay far away from Space Station Nebula as possible," answered Zara with a concerned look on her face. "How about you take a quick stop on my home planet of Glimmeron and I'll tell you all about it." But what could Zara have to tell Professor Quazar, Levi, and Ivy? What was wrong with Space Station Nebula? They had to find out. So off they went to Glimmeron. Once on Glimmeron, Levi and Ivy had lots of questions, but none of them had to do with the Space Station Nebula. "What is that amazing plant?" asked Ivy. "The one with the bright neon pink circular flowers and the electric green vines." "And what was that thing that just flew over my head?" asked Levi. "It looked like a little bear with butterfly wings." Zara was so charmed by Levi and Ivy and all their questions. She took the time to answer them all before filling in the professor. "Those plants are rosy ringles. They're my absolute favorite. So pretty and so tasty," said Zara. "And the flying creature you just saw was my pet BB. It's a bear fly. I think they're the cutest animals in all of Glimmeron." "I think so too," said Levi with wide eyes as Ivy smelled the beautiful rosy ringles. "So now that everyone has met your adorable bearfly, what is going on at Space Station Nebula?" asked Professor Quazar. "I was just there the other day, and I noticed that it was completely covered in smorgans, the little aliens from planet Smorg," began Zara. "You know how mischievous and playful they are. Well, they've taken over Space Station Nebula as their new playground. So I'm pretty sure that whatever is wrong with your camera up there, they did it." "Oh, no," said Professor Quazar. "What's wrong?" asked Ivy. "Can't you just go up to the space station and ask them politely to leave?" "Unfortunately, no. Once Smorgans find a place to play, they're very difficult to move," said Professor Quazar. "But We have to get them off the space station and get the camera fixed. That camera allows us to view the whole galaxy. The images we capture give scientists like me so much valuable information that we can better understand everything that goes on up here. We need to move those smorgans in the name of science. Zara then gave Levi and Ivy a quick class on smorgans and how they act. And before long, they all knew what they were up against. So those little aliens love to play, said Levi. Any game, any puzzle, any activity? They just want to move around and have fun? Added Ivy. So we just need to figure out how we can turn getting control of the space station into a fun game. Yep, that'll be the hard part, said Zara. They are very smart and will know if we're trying to trick them. So the space station was getting destroyed more and more by the silly antics of the Smorgans. Zara, Levi, and Ivy and Professor Quazar were trying to come up with a plan. Space Shuttle Stardust continued to make its way toward the space station as the team thought. Maybe we can play hide and seek, and then we all hide on another planet, suggested Levi. Then when the Smorgans all come over to find us eventually, we can convince them to all stay there. Good idea, but we don't have that much time, said Zara. It could take them days to move from planet to planet looking for us. They would definitely love an extra long game of hide and seek, but Professor Quazar already told me that you have to be back on Earth in a few hours. How about if we give them something to get off the space station, like their favorite treat, suggested Ivy. I know I always do what Mom and Dad ask me. If they tell me, I'll get a cookie. Another good thought, but Smorgans only eat galactic goo-goos. They're kind of like cookies, but after the Smorgans eat them, they get even more energetic, said Zara. They'll probably just be interested in playing more after getting all filled up on those space treats. Professor Quazar continued to steer the space shuttle towards Space Station Nebula, as outside, in the darkness of space, a large cloud began to form, right where they were headed. We're almost there, everyone, called out Professor. Have we come up with our big idea yet? Zara, Levi, and Ivy looked at each other, scratching their heads and still hoping they would figure out what to do. Wait a minute, said Zara. Smorgans love to play. It's all they do. So they have become really good at winning, of course, but also losing. So all we have to do is challenge them to a game and hope they all lose? We can say that before we start, that the winner will get control of the space station. They won't put up a fight if we win fair and square. Levi and Ivy loved the idea and were confident that if they worked together, they could win, no matter what the game was. Sounds like a great plan. How about we play soccer or baseball or even basketball, said Levi. Yeah, Levi and I are good at all of those sports, added Ivy with a smile. I'm sure both of you are very skilled at those Earthling games, but since we're in outer space, we're in Smorgan territory, and we need to pick one of their games to play, said Zara. Zara then went on to tell Levi and Ivy about several different games they could pick from. Tag-a-rang, which is tag, but with a boomerang that you have to catch and throw while running. Twister Twirl, which is a version of Twister, but you play it while twirling around the rings of a nearby planet. Hopscotch Horseplay, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's hopscotch, but on a space horse. And finally, we have Meteorite Mixup, which is where the players dodge some meteorites while catching others to score points. Hey friends, if you had to pick one of those games to play, which would be your favorite? The Smorgans are known all over the galaxy for being the best when it comes to the Meteorite Mixup. But as soon as Levi and Ivy heard the description of the game, they were all about it. That's the one, called out Levi. Yep, we want to play Meteorite Mixup against the best Smorgans you've got, said Ivy. I know we can't win. I just know it. Zara could not have been happier. She loved Meteorite Mixup and quickly explained the main points of the game to her future teammates. As they talked about what their strategy would be against the Smorgans, Professor Quazar updated them on the weather they were heading into. So we have good news and bad news, said the professor. The good news is you'll have plenty of meteorites flying around you for your Meteorite Mixup game. The bad news is it may be way too many. We're heading into a pretty big meteorite storm right now. As the professor gave everyone the news, they looked out the space shuttle's window only to see a storm brewing. The galaxy around them was growing darker, and they could hear the meteorites outside clinking and clanking against the side of the shuttle. Oh, wow, said Zara. How lucky are you? Your very first Meteorite Mixup game, and it's in the middle of a meteorite storm. Levi and Ivy looked a little nervous as they stared at each other. They didn't know if they felt as happy as Zara did with this particular news. You'll be totally fine. Just follow my lead, said Zara reassuringly. And before they knew it, Professor Quazar was docking the space shuttle right next to Space Station Nebula. We're here, everyone, called out the professor. I'll stay here with the Space Shuttle Stardust and keep an eye on you from here. Zara, you're in charge of Levi and Ivy out there. Remember, we only have a couple of hours now. I have to get them back home. You can count on me, Professor, called back Zara as she was getting Levi and Ivy into their spacesuits. Once they were suited up, they exited Space Shuttle Stardust and headed towards Space Station Nebula in a small spacecraft. Once they reached the space station, they hopped out and were ready to meet the Smorgans. As soon as Zara, Levi, and Ivy were on the space station, they saw just how much damage the Smorgans had done to the video equipment. The camera lens was broken, and the entire structure it was attached to was almost falling off the space station. Zara, not wanting to waste any time, waved to one of the Smorgans and said hello. She explained the idea of playing a game of the Meteorite Mixup for the control of the space station, and this is how it went. Laughed the Smorgans as they crowded around Zara, Levi, and Ivy. There's no way you could ever win, said one of the Smorgans, especially with 2 Earthlings on your team. But you know us, we love to play, so we'll definitely play against the 3 of you. The Smorgans passed out the Meteorite Mixup bags that they used to carry the meteorites that each team catches. All the meteorites caught per team were totaled up at the end, and the team with the most wins. As Zara tried to pump up Levi and Ivy going over the rules one more time, the meteorite storm started to intensify. Space rocks of all shapes and sizes started to rain down on them, bouncing off the space station and flying this way and that. It seems like a great time to start our game, called out one of the Smorgans. On your mark, get set, go! And just like that, Levi and Ivy's first game of Meteorite Mixup was underway. The space winds began to blow, and the space rocks were flying faster and faster. Remember, Levi and Ivy, catch the meteorites that are about the size of your Earth's baseballs, called out Zara over all the commotion. Anything bigger or smaller, don't let it hit you. The other Smorgans are watching and will take away a point for every meteorite that touches you. Got it, called out Levi and Ivy. Lucky for Zara and for Space Station Nebula, Levi and Ivy caught on to games very quickly. I got one, Zara, yelled out Ivy with a smile on her face. Great! Put that meteorite in your bag and keep going, called back Zara. I got one too, called out Levi, feeling very proud of himself, until he, Zara, and Ivy turned to see all the Smorgans that were playing, grabbing nearly every baseball-sized meteorite that came anywhere near them. We have to work extra hard to win, called out Zara. We knew that coming into this game. Remember, we have to win this game in the name of science. As Zara was giving her pep talk, Levi and Ivy looked towards Space Shuttle Stardust and saw Professor Quazar looking out at them from one of the shuttle windows. He was giving them a thumbs up. He trusted them and believed they could win. He knew that he could get Space Station Nebula back so he could fix it and once again be able to study and learn all about the mysteries of outer space. Levi and Ivy loved science so much that they knew they had to do everything they could to win. They didn't want to let Professor Quazar, Zara, or the rest of the world of science down. That's when they turned it up. In a matter of minutes, they dove, dipped, jumped, and flew to grab every meteorite they could. They also zigged, zagged, shimmied, and shook to avoid letting any of the sneaky space rocks touch them. And after what seemed like a light year, one of the Smorgans who was watching over the Meteorite Mixup game signaled that it was over. Everyone playing was instructed to take their meteorite bags to the judges for counting. The Smorgans, as always, had a very impressive showing. 1,009 meteorites have been collected by the Smorgans, with no penalties or points taken away for getting hit, said one of the judges. All the Smorgans applauded and cheered loudly. Now on to the Earthlings and Zara from planet Glimmeron, said the judge. As he took out each meteorite, Zara, Levi, and Ivy tried to count along, but lost track as the meteorites piled up on the ground. It may be close, whispered Levi to Ivy. But will it be enough? She whispered back. When the judge was done counting up their meteorites, he wrote down the number and turned to his fellow judges. Levi and Ivy couldn't tell by the look on their faces whether they had won or lost. They were nervous and didn't know what they would do if they didn't win. How would they face Professor Quazar? They didn't want to let him down. At that moment, they saw that Professor had ventured out of the space shuttle to hear the final ruling. He walked toward them with his thumbs up and a smile on his face. Gather round, everyone, called out one of the Smorgan judges. It looks like we have a winner, called out one of the other Smorgans, starting to cheer for his team. No, not exactly, said the judge. It looks like we have a tie. The Earthlings and Zara also collected 1,009 meteorites. Well, what are we going to do now? Asked the Professor Quazar. They only said they would leave Space Station Nebula if they lost. We never decided what we would do in case of a tie. Levi and Ivy couldn't believe their ears. They were frustrated and upset in all the commotion. Ivy kicked the bag she had been collecting her meteorites in, and that's when she noticed something. Something really hard in her bag. Ow! Cried out Ivy. What's wrong? Called Zara. My bag. I kicked it and something inside it really hurt my foot, answered Ivy as she floated around. We didn't win and now I hurt my foot. What a day. That's when Zara put facts together and knew exactly what was in Ivy's meteorite bag. She ran over to the bag, picked it up, and reached inside. And there it was. Exactly what she thought she'd find. One more meteorite. 1,010! 1,010! Called out Zara. We didn't tie. We won. We caught 1,010 meteorites. Look! The Smorgen judge was shocked when he turned around and saw Zara holding up one last baseball-sized meteorite. Wow, she's right, said the judge. The winner of the Meteorite Mixup is Zara and the Earthlings. The Smorgans could not believe what they were hearing, but after the initial shock wore off, they congratulated the winners. The Smorgans, after all, loved games so much that they had all learned how to be good winners and good losers. Congratulations, Zara! You and your friends beat us fair and square, said the Smorgans. The space station is all yours. Then as quickly as they had taken over the Space Station Nebula, the Smorgans were off, ready to find a new place to play. Professor Quazar floated over and congratulated Zara, Levi, and Ivy. Thank you all so much. I knew you could do it. I never had a doubt, said the professor. I wish we had more time to celebrate, but we're running out of time and we need to get to the space station camera back up and running before we head home. Zara, Levi, and Ivy all jumped into action, following the professor's lead and doing whatever he asked of them. After about an hour or so of working in the midst of a meteorite storm, the camera on the space station was fully up and working again. Then, once back in Space Station Shuttle Stardust, Professor Quazar was able to thank Zara again for all her help and say goodbye. Until next time, my friend, said the professor. I'm looking forward to it, replied Zara. It's always so much fun when you stop by for a visit. Maybe next time you can bring Levi and Ivy again. We'd love that, shouted Levi and Ivy together. I'd love that too, said Professor Quazar. And with that, they all said a final goodbye and off they flew back to Earth with Zara waving goodbye from planet Glimmeron. As Space Shuttle Stardust landed gracefully back in the large garage at the Science Museum, Professor Quazar once again thanked Levi and Ivy for their bravery and hard work. Once out of the space shuttle and back into the lab, they watched as the professor turned the space station camera back on. Once again, they were able to see all the wonders of the universe. It looks like we made it back just in time, said the professor as Levi and Ivy's parents walked through the door of his lab, led by a security guard from the museum. So, how was your day? Asked Levi and Ivy's dad. Did you have fun in the lab? Doing lots of fun science and space stuff? Asked their mom. Levi and Ivy giggled as they looked at each other and back at Professor Quazar. Yep, lots of fun in the lab, said Ivy. Just a regular old day at the museum, added Levi. They are welcome back here anytime, said Professor Quazar. I can't wait to see what amazing scientists they'll become one day. That's so nice of you to say, said Levi and Ivy's dad as he caught sight of the screens displaying the camera's view from Space Station Nebula. Wow, that look into the galaxy is breathtaking. Can you imagine what it would be like to be up there? Asked Levi and Ivy's mom, taking a closer look at the screen. Yep, I think I could, whispered Levi to Ivy as she gave her brother a wink and a smile. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the story and learned a little something too.
And since we know everyone has their own story, we'd love to hear yours.
If you have an idea for a Lively Lewis story, leave a comment on our Apple Podcast review page with 5 stars, your idea, and your little one's name.
Then maybe our next adventure will be with you.
Until our next Storytime Hangout.
Thanks for listening. We can't wait to share another fun, Lively Lewis story with you.
This is an iHeart podcast.